The child's voice, a fragile melody in the thick Charleston air, sliced through the humid evening with the unexpected sharpness of a knife through silk. "Please, sir," she pleaded, her small voice barely audible above the hum of the city. "Look under your car." 7 years old, her small frame trembled as she leaned against the cool brick of Victorio's restaurant wall. She found herself facing 5 men, figures shrouded in whispers and local lore. Not bikers, not gang members in the traditional sense, but something far more nuanced, something the city respected and quietly feared in equal measure. The Vitali family. Men who favored tailored suits and spoke with a soft, commanding authority. Men who had run the waterfront, its businesses, its secrets, for 3 generations. But young Emma Rodriguez, with the unblinking clarity of a child's gaze, had witnessed something unsettling in the alley behind her mother's flower shop earlier that afternoon. An image that clung to her mind, turning her small hands clammy and sending her heart racing like a trapped bird. 2 police officers, Detective Marcus Hall, a man whose face graced local billboards, and his partner, were crouching beside a sleek, black Mercedes, their movements too quick, too furtive, as they carefully planted something beneath the car's chassis. A setup, a frame, a carefully constructed lie, draped in the authority of badges and the weight of the law. Now those 5 men, oblivious to the danger closing in, were finishing their dinner inside Victorio's, their laughter and conversation a stark contrast to the silent storm gathering outside. Unmarked police cars, like predators circling their prey, edged closer, their engines purring with restrained power. Emma had mere seconds to decide. To remain silent, to retreat into the safety of anonymity, or to speak truth to power, to risk everything on a desperate gamble. The word she chose next would either save 5 lives or irrevocably alter, perhaps even shatter, her own. The late September air hung heavy over Charleston's historic district, carrying a heady mix of jasmine's sweet perfume, the sharp tang of saltwater from the nearby harbor, and the tantalizing aromas of low-country cooking that had made Victorio's a culinary landmark. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in vibrant hues of amber and rose, and the gas lamps along Broad Street flickered to life, casting a soft, golden glow on the cobblestone streets. Victorio's occupied a corner that had silently witnessed 3 centuries of Charleston history, its bricks bearing the silent testimony of wars, fires, and countless lives lived within its embrace. The restaurant's facade was classic Charleston. Brick painted a soft, welcoming cream color, accented by black shutters and a wrought iron balcony on the 2nd floor, overflowing with vibrant, flowering vines. 7-year-old Emma Rodriguez pressed herself against the cool wall beside the service entrance, seeking a small measure of courage in the familiar texture. Her pink backpack, adorned with cartoon characters, was clutched tightly to her chest, a makeshift shield against the rising tide of fear. Her school uniform, a navy jumper and white blouse, was rumpled from the long, tiring school day, and her dark curls had escaped the confines of their morning braids, framing her face in a wild halo. But it wasn't mere exhaustion that made her tremble. It was a profound, bone-deep fear that tasted metallic and sharp on her tongue. Through the restaurant's tall, arched windows, she could see them. 5 men, seated at their usual corner table, a space always reserved, always waiting. At the head of the table sat Giovanni Vitali, a man in his early 60s, his silver hair swept back from a face that appeared to have been sculpted from marble. His suit, impeccably tailored in charcoal gray, spoke of understated elegance, and his hands, strong and capable, rested calmly on the crisp white tablecloth. A single, heavy gold ring, a family heirloom perhaps, caught the candlelight, casting a fleeting spark. Everyone in Charleston knew the Vitali family. They owned the shipping company that had been a fixture of the city since 1924, a lifeline to the world beyond. They funded hospitals and libraries, their generosity whispered about in grateful tones. Giovanni's grandfather, a figure of legend, had built half the affordable housing in the district during the depths of the Great Depression, providing shelter and hope when both were scarce. But they also controlled everything that moved through Charleston's bustling port, and there were stories, whispered in hushed tones, never quite proven, about what happened to those who dared to challenge that control. Emma knew their reputation. Her mother, Rosa, a woman of fierce protectiveness, had warned her since she was old enough to understand words. Stay away from those men, mija. They're not what they seem. No matter how much money they give to charity, no matter how polite they are, they're dangerous. But Emma also carried another, conflicting piece of knowledge. Last winter, when her mother's flower shop had been burglarized, its windows vandalized with hateful, racist slurs spray-painted across the glass, it had been someone from the Vitali organization who had sent workers to clean and repair everything overnight. No charge, no explanation offered, just a simple, understated card that read, "No one should be made to feel unwelcome in their own neighborhood." Her mother had wept when she read it, tears of gratitude and confusion mingling on her cheeks. That memory flickered through Emma's mind now, a conflicting signal in the sea of fear, as she watched Giovanni laugh at something his nephew said. They looked so ordinary, so human, sharing bread and wine, their conversation filled with familial warmth. It made what she had to do even more terrifying because it forced her to acknowledge that the monsters in her mother's cautionary tales might actually be more complex, more nuanced than the simple story she had been told. Emma's legs felt like water as she finally pushed herself away from the wall, the rough brick scraping against her skin. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to flee to the perceived safety of her mother's flower shop 2 blocks away, to let someone else, someone older, someone braver, handle this. But there was no time. She had overheard the detectives talking, their casual cruelty chilling her to the bone. She knew what was supposed to happen when those men returned to their cars. The restaurant door was heavy oak, reinforced with brass, and it took all of Emma's strength to pull it open, the hinges groaning in protest. The moment she stepped inside, she was enveloped in a wave of warmth, the rich, intoxicating smell of garlic and wine, the murmur of conversation, and the gentle clinking of silverware against china. The maitre d', a thin, impeccably dressed man in a tuxedo, looked down at her with a mixture of surprise and immediate disapproval. "Child, this is not a place for—" "I need to talk to Mr. Vitali," Emma interrupted, her voice barely above a whisper, her heart pounding in her chest. "Please, it's important." The maitre d's expression shifted from disapproval to alarm, his eyes widening slightly. "Absolutely not. You need to leave before." "Let her approach." The voice was quiet, almost a murmur, but it carried an undeniable weight of authority, silencing the maitre d' instantly. Giovanni Vitali had turned in his seat, his dark eyes fixed on Emma with an intensity that made her want to shrink into the floor and disappear. The entire restaurant had fallen silent, the hum of conversation replaced by an oppressive stillness. Even the kitchen seemed to have paused, the clatter of pots and pans abruptly ceasing. Emma's mouth went dry, her tongue feeling thick and clumsy. The distance between the entrance and that corner table felt like miles, an endless expanse of polished wood and judging eyes. But she forced her feet to move, each step a monumental effort. One step, then another, the soles of her shoes squeaking softly on the polished floor. Her heart hammered so hard against her ribs, she thought everyone in the restaurant must be able to hear it. A frantic drumbeat in the silent room. "What's your name, little one?" Giovanni asked, his voice surprisingly gentle, a stark contrast to the steely gaze in his eyes. His body language, however, remained alert, protective, radiating an unspoken power. "Emma Rodriguez," she managed to choke out, her voice trembling. "My mama has the flower shop on Church Street." Recognition flickered across the face of one of the younger men, Antonio, Giovanni's nephew, a man with a boyish face and a watchful demeanor. "Rosa's daughter." "Yes," Emma whispered, her voice gaining a fraction of strength. She was close enough now to see the fine fabric of Giovanni's suit, the subtle sheen of the gold cufflinks at his wrists, the faint, almost imperceptible scar above his left eyebrow, a silent testament to a violent past carefully hidden beneath layers of cultured manners. "And why does Rosa's daughter need to speak with me?" Giovanni leaned back slightly, his hands remaining visible on the table, a deliberate gesture that Emma somehow understood was meant to reassure her. to make her feel safe. Emma's eyes welled with tears, blurring her vision, but she forced the words out, her voice cracking with emotion. You need to look under your cars, all of you, right now. There's something there, something bad. I saw them putting it there. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees, the air thickening with unspoken tension. Hands that had been relaxed now tensed, fingers curling into fists beneath the tablecloth. The younger men started to rise from their seats, their faces hardening, but Giovanni raised one finger, barely a movement, a subtle gesture of command, and everyone froze, their movements arrested mid-action. Who did you see, Emma? His voice remained calm, but there was an undercurrent of steel beneath the surface, a quiet menace that sent a shiver down Emma's spine. The police, she whispered, her voice barely audible, and then louder, desperately. Detective Hall and his partner. They were in the alley behind my mama's shop. They had packages wrapped in plastic. Her voice cracked, tears streaming down her face. They said the Vitalis were poison in this city, and it was time to cut out the cancer. Before Giovanni could respond, the sharp sound of car doors slamming echoed from outside, shattering the tense silence. Through the windows, Emma could see unmarked vehicles pulling up to the curb, their headlights cutting through the evening gloom. Men in dark suits and tactical vests emerged, their faces grim, their attention fixed on the row of luxury cars parked along the curb. And at the front of the group, his badge glinting ominously in the gaslight, was Detective Marcus Hall, the man the city celebrated as incorruptible, a hero in the tireless war against organized crime. Giovanni's eyes met Emma's, and in that brief, intense moment, she saw a flicker of understanding dawn in his dark gaze. His expression didn't change, remaining carefully neutral, but something in his posture shifted, a subtle tightening of his jaw, a barely perceptible tensing of his muscles. How old are you, child? He asked softly, his voice almost a whisper. 7. 7 years old. He repeated, almost to himself, as if trying to comprehend the weight of her words, the improbable courage of her actions. Then louder, addressing his companions. Gentlemen, it seems we have an unexpected situation on our hands. We're going to step outside together. All of us, including this young lady, who I believe has just saved us from a very serious misunderstanding. Detective Hall pushed through the restaurant door with the unshakable confidence of a man who believed he was about to make history, his every movement radiating an air of righteous authority. He was in his mid-40s, fit and trim, with the kind of square-jawed good looks that made him a frequent guest on the local news, a reassuring presence in a city grappling with complex issues. His service weapon was holstered but clearly visible, a subtle reminder of the power he wielded, and his expression carried a grim satisfaction, the look of a hunter closing in on his prey. Giovanni Vitali, he announced, his voice booming through the silent restaurant, silencing the remaining whispers and murmurs. I have warrants to search your vehicles based on credible intelligence regarding narcotics trafficking. You and your associates will remain inside while we execute these warrants. Actually, Giovanni said, standing slowly, his movements deliberate and graceful, his eyes never leaving Hall's face. He adjusted his cufflinks with meticulous care, a subtle display of composure in the face of escalating tension. I think we'll all go outside together in front of witnesses, because this young lady just brought something very interesting to my attention. Hall's eyes flicked to Emma, a flicker of surprise quickly followed by a barely perceptible flash of panic, a crack in the carefully constructed facade of authority. The little girl saw it, a brief glimpse behind the mask, a fleeting moment of vulnerability quickly concealed. The child should leave, Hall said, his voice hardening, his gaze turning cold. This is police business. The child, Giovanni replied, his voice taking on an edge that could cut glass, is the reason we're all about to discover the truth. Tell me, detective, how long have you been planning this? They filed outside into the warm evening air, an unlikely procession of alleged criminals, police officers, restaurant patrons who had grabbed their phones to record the unfolding drama, and one small girl who had somehow become the fulcrum on which everything balanced. The cars gleamed under the streetlights, their polished surfaces reflecting the golden glow of the gas lamps. A black Mercedes S-Class, a midnight blue BMW, a silver Audi. Each one immaculate, a symbol of wealth and power. Each one worth more than most Charleston families earned in a year. Giovanni approached his Mercedes first, moving with the same careful deliberation he had shown inside the restaurant. He knelt slowly, making sure everyone could see, and looked underneath the vehicle. His expression went very still, the lines around his eyes deepening. "Antonio," he said, his voice calm but firm, "bring a phone with a light. Everyone should see this." Antonio moved quickly, his smartphone's flashlight cutting through the shadows, illuminating the undercarriage of the Mercedes. What the camera revealed made several onlookers gasp, their breath catching in their throats. There, secured with professional-grade zip ties, were 3 packages wrapped in clear plastic. But it wasn't just the packages themselves that drew gasps of shock and disbelief. It was the evidence tape, clearly visible through the clear wrapping, marked with Charleston PD case numbers, a blatant display of corruption. And next to them, affixed to the chassis with magnetic strips, was a GPS tracker, its tiny LED blinking red in the shadows, a silent beacon of deception. "Those are evidence bags," someone in the growing crowd whispered, their voice filled with incredulity. "Those are official Charleston PD evidence bags." Detective Hall's face had gone from confident to ashen, his square jaw slack with disbelief. "Someone must have stolen them," he stammered, his voice losing its earlier conviction. "This is clearly a frame job, designed to make the department look. To make the department look like what, exactly?" Giovanni interrupted, his voice dripping with sarcasm. He had stood up and now he moved methodically down the line of cars, checking each one with Antonio diligently documenting everything with his phone. "Like they're corrupt? Like they'd plant evidence on law-abiding citizens? Because that's exactly what this looks like, detective. And those evidence bag numbers, they can be traced. They have chain of custody records, signatures, timestamps. This isn't some amateur operation." A younger officer, barely 25, had gone pale, his face a mask of shock and horror. He pulled out his phone with shaking hands, his fingers fumbling with the keypad. "Sir," he said, his voice trembling, "I think we need to call internal affairs right now." "You'll do no such thing," Hall snapped, his authority crumbling like sand beneath the relentless tide of evidence. "I am the senior detective here, and I'm ordering you to—" "To what?" Giovanni interrupted, his voice quiet but lethal, a predator savoring its moment of victory. "To help you cover up a false arrest? To be complicit in framing innocent citizens? Because that's what we are, detective. Innocent. My family has operated in this city for 95 years. We pay taxes. We employ 600 people. My nephew Antonio coaches Little League every summer. My brother Marco sits on the board of 3 charities." He took a step toward Hall, closing the distance between them, and despite being 3 inches shorter, somehow Giovanni seemed to tower over the detective, his presence radiating an aura of quiet power. "We have a reputation that makes people uncomfortable. We come from a culture that values loyalty and family above all else. So, instead of getting to know us, instead of honoring your oath to protect all citizens equally, you decided we were too different, too suspicious, too outside your narrow definition of acceptable. You decided to destroy us rather than live alongside us." A woman pushed forward from the crowd, her face flushed with anger and indignation. Mrs. Patterson, who owned the beloved bookstore on King Street, a local institution. "I've known the Vitalis for 30 years, she declared, her voice ringing with conviction. "They donated $50,000 to rebuild our library after the flood. They're at every charity event, every community meeting. This is disgraceful." Other voices joined hers, rising in a chorus of support. The owner of the hardware store, a grizzled veteran of countless Charleston storms, spoke up. "Vitali Shipping gave my son his first job when no one else would hire him after his conviction. Gave him a second chance." The pastor from the AME church, his eyes shining with righteous fire, added his voice to the growing swell. Giovanni's family funded our youth center, anonymous donation, but everyone knew it was them. They've always been there for this community. The tide was turning. The crowd that had gathered, expecting to witness the takedown of organized crime, was instead forming a protective semicircle around the 5 men in suits, their faces reflecting a mixture of shock, anger, and a growing sense of disillusionment. Phones recorded from every angle, capturing every word, every gesture, every nuance of the unfolding drama. The truth was being documented in real time, disseminated across social media, and broadcast to the world. Detective Hall's hand moved almost instinctively toward his weapon, a desperate, cornered gesture, the last refuge of a man losing control. But the young officer stepped between them, his face pale but resolute. "Don't, sir," he pleaded, his voice trembling but firm. "Please don't make this worse." The sound of sirens cut through the rising tension, a discordant wail that heralded the arrival of backup. FBI vehicles were approaching, summoned by someone in the crowd whose voice of reason had cut through the chaos, their arrival signaling the start of a new chapter in the unfolding drama. What followed was 3 hours of statements, evidence collection, and the methodical dismantling of what turned out to be a 5-year conspiracy, a web of deceit and corruption that had poisoned the very foundations of Charleston's justice system. The FBI's investigation would eventually reveal that Detective Hall had been planting evidence on undesirables for years, systematically targeting those he deemed to be a threat to his vision of Charleston's proper society. Not just the Vitalis, but immigrants, minorities, anyone who didn't fit his narrow, prejudiced worldview. The evidence bags contained drugs Hall had stolen from the department's confiscated property room, a blatant abuse of power. The GPS trackers were purchased with department funds, their purpose twisted to serve his insidious agenda. He documented everything in encrypted files, outlining his plan to clean up the city, one frame job at a time. His actions fueled by a dangerous cocktail of arrogance, prejudice, and a misguided sense of self-righteousness. Emma sat on the restaurant's front steps with her mother, who had arrived running and terrified, pulled from her flower shop by a neighbor's frantic call. Rosa held her daughter so tightly Emma could barely breathe, whispering prayers of thanks and terror in rapid Spanish, her words tumbling over each other in a torrent of emotion. Giovanni approached them carefully, respectfully, as though understanding that Rosa's fear of him was real, deeply ingrained, and not entirely unjustified. "Mrs. Rodriguez," he said quietly, his voice filled with genuine gratitude. "Your daughter showed extraordinary courage tonight." Rosa's eyes were red and swollen, but her gaze was fierce, protective. "She's 7 years old," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "She should never have had to be brave like this." "You're absolutely right," Giovanni agreed, his voice softening. "But she was. And because of her, 5 innocent men won't go to prison. And because of her, the FBI is now investigating dozens of other cases. People who are currently in prison might get new trials. Your daughter didn't just save us. She exposed something rotten in this city's justice system." He crouched down to Emma's height, his weathered face softening into a gentle smile. "You were very brave today, Piccolola. Brave and foolish." He paused, his expression becoming serious. "In my world, saving someone's life creates a debt. Not money," he added quickly, noticing Rosa tense, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. "But protection. If you ever need anything, anything at all, you call this number." He handed her a simple, unadorned card. "You're under our protection now, both of you." Emma studied him with eyes that seemed older than 7, her gaze unwavering. "Are you really bad men? People say you are." Giovanni gave a sad, knowing smile. "We're men who value family and loyalty. We've made mistakes, lived in gray areas because survival isn't always clean. But we love this city. We take care of our people. The truth is rarely as simple as rumors." When the FBI finally cleared the scene and the crowd thinned, the street returning to some semblance of normalcy, Emma watched Giovanni leave in a borrowed car, his silhouette disappearing into the night. She thought about how scared she had been, how easily she could have stayed silent, hidden in the shadows, and let the injustice unfold. "Mama," she whispered, her voice small and hesitant. Did I do the right thing? Rosa watched the tail lights fade into the distance, her arms still wrapped tightly around her daughter's shoulders. You told the truth when silence was safer, she said softly, her voice filled with pride and relief. Yes, mija, she continued, squeezing Emma's hand. You did the right thing. I just hope you never have to be that brave again. 3 months later, Emma stood outside the federal courthouse, the cold winter air biting at her cheeks. Detective Marcus Hall was being sentenced to 15 years in prison, his career and reputation in ruins. 12 cases tied to him had already been overturned, innocent people finally tasting freedom after years of unjust imprisonment. Emma wasn't there for him to witness his downfall. She was there because the first freed victim, James Chun, a hardworking immigrant framed on drug charges, wanted to thank her, to express his gratitude to the little girl who had dared to speak truth to power. She watched him hug his mother, their reunion a poignant tableau of love and forgiveness. She watched him hold his infant son for the first time, a moment stolen from him by a corrupt system, now finally restored. Giovanni stood quietly beside Emma and Rosa, his presence a silent promise of protection, a testament to the debt he felt he owed. The Vitali family had kept their word, their actions speaking louder than any promises. A pro bono lawyer, one of the best in the city, had successfully defended Rosa's shop against a frivolous lawsuit, likely instigated by Hall's remaining allies. An anonymous donation, whispered to have come from the Vitalis, had revived Emma's school art program, providing much-needed supplies and inspiration. Protection, Emma realized, came in many forms, both tangible and intangible. As they walked home through the historic district, the cobblestone streets echoing with the footsteps of generations, she finally asked, her voice barely a whisper, Mr. Vitali, what happens now? Will people still be scared of you? Some will, he admitted, his voice tinged with a trace of sadness. Fear is easy. Understanding is harder. But your courage changed something, Emma. It gave the city a chance to see us more clearly. That's all anyone can hope for. He paused at the corner, the gas lamps casting long, dancing shadows on the brick buildings. And it reminded my family that the best way to fight prejudice is to live with integrity and let our actions speak louder than our reputations. Emma held her mother's hand, feeling the smooth, cool surface of the small silver magnolia charm he had given her that night, a symbol of hope and resilience. Will I see you again? She asked, her eyes searching his. I imagine so, he said, his eyes twinkling with amusement. And your mother makes the best flower arrangements in the district. My wife insists on them. As they walked home through the streets that somehow felt safer, cleaner, more filled with possibility, Emma thought about courage, fear, and the choice she had made not to look away, not to remain silent. Because of that decision, lives had changed, truths had surfaced, and a city had been forced to reconsider its long-held assumptions. The magnolia charm glinted in the lamplight, a small beacon of hope in the darkness. She was still just a 7-year-old girl who loved drawing and her cat, Whiskers, but she was also proof that even a small voice, spoken with courage, can reshape a community, can challenge injustice, and can ultimately change the world.